This flip lesson is on energy transfer. Again, everything that is on the whiteboards behind me, you will put into your spiral notebook. All right, so our next unit was still the same unit because we're talking about waves, but this is energy transfer. How does energy move from object to object? Okay, it's important to know that energy, and we'll use the word heat here because that's what we're going to talk a lot about. Heat moves from hot places to cold places. All right, so that is very important that you know that energy moves from warm to cold. Okay, so if I take ice and put it into my glass here, the room temperature water will add energy to the ice, and the glass will then eventually all be the same temperature. All right, and we call that same temperature equilibrium. All right, if I open up my classroom door and it's 40 degrees in the hallway and it's 25 degrees in my classroom, the warm energy from the hallway will move into my classroom. All right, there are three different types of energy transfer. All right, the first of which is called conduction. All right, and this is how energy transfers between two solids. Okay, there actually has to be physical touch involved. Some examples that we'll talk a lot about: if I put a pot on the stove and pot are physically touching, that's solid to solid, the energy transfers from the stove to the pot. Or if I put ice cubes in my hand, that's solid touching solid, the energy from my hand will move towards the ice cubes, which will eventually melt them. The second kind of energy transfer is called convection. All right, this is energy transfer in liquids and gases. Some examples: boiling water. Okay, the water starts to gain energy and the liquid will start to heat from the bottom to the top. That's an example of convection. All right, wind currents, the constant circulating of warm and cool air would be an example. Or if I have a heater in my classroom and it's heating up the room, it's actually circulating warm air through the gases in the room, which is another example. The last one is radiation. All right, and this is energy transfer from the sun. All right, another example, and of course I put sunlight here, another example would be a campfire. All right, that energy from the fire would actually be another example of radiation. Now, it gets kind of confusing because if you think of a campfire, it's actually going to be warming the air. All right, the heat from the fire is radiation, but it is also a form of convection because it would actually have heating of the gases of the air around it. All right, so here's an example I drew. We have a pot here on the stove. All right, the pot and stove physically touching, that's conduction. All right, when the water starts to boil, that's actually convection because this is a liquid. Now, it's very important that you know the difference between these three examples: convection, conduction, and radiation, and being able to decide which type of energy transfer is most appropriate to a situation. So if I asked you in this situation here, the pot being heated by the stove, the best example of that is conduction. But if I reference the water in the pot, the best answer there would be convection. And we're going to do an activity this week where you're looking at different pictures and scenarios and deciding which type of energy transfer is the best example in each of those scenarios.